The ochre dust of Mars, finer than any earthbound sand, perpetually coated the habitation dome Ares 6, a testament to humanity's tenuous grip on the alien world. Inside, however, the air was recycled and sterile, or at least it was supposed to be. Dr. Eris Thorne, his face etched with a weariness that the dim, artificial lighting couldn't quite conceal, stared at the latest bioscan results. Another colonist, Elara Vance, a young botanist known for her vibrant hydroponics bay, was exhibiting the telltale signs: a spiking fever that defied conventional antibiotics, a disorienting confusion, and the unsettlingly rapid degradation of her cellular structures. It had started subtly, a handful of isolated cases dismissed as a novel Martian flu. But in the last 2 cycles, the affliction had spread like wildfire through the tightly packed colony. Fear, a primal emotion long thought subdued by rigorous psychological screening, now hung heavy in the recycled air. The initial optimism of establishing a permanent foothold on Mars was rapidly eroding, replaced by a gnawing terror. Commander Jian Li, the colony's pragmatic leader, had cordoned off the infected, straining the already limited medical resources. He'd also, as a last resort, contacted Earth, the agonizing communication delay amplifying their desperation. Their pleas for understanding and a cure were met with a mixture of shock and scientific speculation, none of which offered immediate relief. Into this simmering pot of fear and uncertainty stepped Detective Isabella Izzy Diaz. Exiled to Mars after a controversial case back on Earth, Izzy found the sterile, predictable environment a suffocating contrast to the chaotic energy of Neo-London. Now, however, a grim familiarity was creeping in. Death, in any environment, had a way of smelling the same. Commander Lee, his face grim, had tasked her with finding the source of the outbreak. Sabotage was his primary concern, a fear whispered in the corridors, disgruntled Earth-based factions opposed to Martian colonization, perhaps, or even a radical fringe within the colony itself. Izzy, however, wasn't so quick to jump to conspiracy. The symptoms, while alarming, felt organic. But the sheer speed of the cellular breakdown was unprecedented. As she reviewed Elara Vance's medical history, a peculiar anomaly caught her eye: a faint, almost imperceptible increase in silicon deposits within her bone marrow in the weeks leading up to the onset. It was a minor detail, easily overlooked, but something about it pricked Izzy's sharp intuition. This wasn't just a disease, it was something else entirely. Izzy began her investigation by retracing Elara Vance's steps in the days before she fell ill. The hydroponics bay, usually a vibrant riot of green, now felt sterile and unsettlingly quiet. Elara's colleagues spoke of her increasing fascination with Martian soil samples, particularly those collected from a newly explored region known as the Whispering Dunes, an area characterized by unusual magnetic anomalies. She said they felt alive. One of Elara's junior assistants, a nervous young man named Kenji, recounted. She'd spend hours analyzing them under the microscope, muttering about crystalline structures and voices. Izzy frowned. Voices? Dismissing it as stress-induced fantasy, she nonetheless requested access to Elara's research logs and the soil samples she had been studying. The logs were filled with detailed analyses of mineral compositions, but interspersed were increasingly cryptic notes. Phrases like the hum, the resonance, and a new consciousness awakening appeared with alarming frequency. The soil samples themselves looked unremarkable, reddish-brown dust like any other Martian regolith. But under the colony's powerful electron microscope, Izzy saw what had captivated Elara. Intricate, almost geometric structures were embedded within the silicate particles, forming networks that resembled neural pathways. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Meanwhile, the number of infected continued to rise. Panic was setting in. Commander Lee was under immense pressure from Earth, facing demands for containment and increasingly hostile speculation about the colony's viability. He saw Izzy's investigation as a distraction from the immediate crisis, a sentiment echoed by Dr. Anya Sharma, the colony's head physician, who was desperately trying to manage the overwhelming influx of patients. "Detective," Dr. Sharma said, her voice tight with exhaustion, "while you're chasing shadows and soil samples, people are dying. We need a medical solution, not a Martian ghost story." Izzy understood her frustration, But she couldn't shake the feeling that the answer lay not in Earth-based medicine, but within the very ground beneath their feet. She requested a geological survey of the Whispering Dunes, focusing on the magnetic anomalies Alara had mentioned. She also began discreetly looking into the backgrounds of the colony's founders, a small group of visionary, and some whispered, eccentric, scientists and entrepreneurs who had spearheaded the Mars project decades ago. Their initial manifestos spoke of expansion and discovery, but Izzy wondered if there was a hidden agenda, a more radical vision for humanity's future among the stars. The geological survey confirmed Alara's findings. The Whispering Dunes exhibited unusually strong and localized magnetic fields, seemingly emanating from deep beneath the surface. Furthermore, the soil samples from that region contained a significantly higher concentration of the strange crystalline structures. Driven by a growing sense of unease, Izzy focused her attention on the colony's archives, specifically the records pertaining to its founding. Commander Lee, though skeptical, granted her access, assigning a young archivist, Lieutenant Marcus Cole, to assist her. Marcus, initially dismissive of Izzy's unorthodox approach, soon found himself drawn into the detective's relentless pursuit of answers. Within the dusty digital files, Izzy unearthed a series of encrypted communications between the colony's lead founder, Dr. Elias Vance, Alara's grandfather, she now realized, and a shadowy organization known only as Genesis. The decrypted messages spoke of Project Chimera, biological transcendence, and the awakening of the Martian consciousness. The language was esoteric, almost cult-like, hinting at something far beyond simple colonization. One particular message sent chills down Izzy's spine. The catalyst is responding. The symbiotic integration has begun. Soon, the old flesh will be shed, and a new consciousness will bloom in the red dust. Izzy realized with a sickening certainty that the disease wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate act, a forced transformation orchestrated by the colony's founders. Alara hadn't stumbled upon a pathogen. She had discovered the early stages of a pre-programmed metamorphosis. The silicon deposits in her bone marrow, the rapid cellular degradation. It was all part of a radical biological restructuring. But to what end? What was this Martian consciousness they spoke of? And what role did the magnetic anomalies in the Whispering Dunes play? Izzy needed to find someone who understood the science behind this madness, someone who might have been involved in the early stages of Project Chimera. Her search led her to the forgotten files of Dr. Anya Sharma's predecessor, a brilliant but disgraced xenobiologist named Dr. Alastair Ramsey, who had mysteriously disappeared years ago after raising concerns about the founders' more unorthodox theories. Dr. Ramsey's archived research notes were a treasure trove of unsettling theories. He had posited the existence of a planet-wide silicon-based life formed dormant beneath the Martian surface, a vast, interconnected consciousness that communicated through electromagnetic fields. He believed the founders of the colony, particularly Dr. Elias Vance, had become obsessed with the idea of merging humanity with this Martian entity, achieving a form of digital immortality and symbiotic existence with the planet itself. Ramsey's notes detailed Vance's radical theories on directed evolution and the use of a biocatalyst to initiate the transformation. The symptoms plaguing the colonists perfectly matched Ramsey's predictions for the early stages of this forced metamorphosis. The increased silicon absorption, the neural disruption leading to confusion, the breakdown of carbon-based cells to be replaced by something else. Izzy tracked down Ramsey's last known associate, a reclusive astrophysicist living in the Outer Hab modules. The astrophysicist, a frail woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, confirmed Ramsey's fears. She revealed that Vance had secretly developed a sophisticated network of underground emitters beneath the Whispering Dunes, designed to amplify the Martian consciousness and trigger the biocatalyst, which had been subtly introduced into the colony's water supply years ago. Alastair tried to stop him, Dr. Reed whispered, her voice trembling. He warned them it was madness, that they were playing with forces they didn't understand. Then, he just vanished. They said he had a medical emergency and was sent back to Earth, but I never believed it. Izzy now understood the timeline. The slow, insidious introduction of the biocatalyst, the recent activation of the emitters in the Whispering Dunes. It was all part of Vance's grand, terrifying plan. But why now? What had triggered this sudden acceleration of Project Chimera? The answer, Izzy realized, might lie with Alara Vance. Her fascination with the Whispering Dunes, her notes about resonance. Perhaps she had unknowingly stumbled upon the key to activating the next stage of the transformation, prompting her grandfather's followers to initiate the final phase. As more colonists succumbed to the disease, their physical forms undergoing increasingly disturbing changes, Izzy knew she was running out of time. Commander Lee, desperate for any solution, was finally starting to believe her theories. Dr. Sharma, though still clinging to hope for a conventional medical breakthrough, was visibly shaken by the failure of all her treatments. Izzy, accompanied by Marcus and a heavily armed security team, descended into the network of service tunnels beneath the habitation dome, following Dr. Reed's directions to the primary emitter control station. The air grew thick with a low, almost imperceptible hum, a vibration that resonated deep within their bones. They found the control station deserted, the main console displaying a complex array of energy readings emanating from beneath the Whispering Dunes. One section of the display pulsed with an intense blue light, labeled Subject Zero. Izzy accessed the logs, and her blood ran cold. Subject Zero was Dr. Elias Vance himself, and his vital signs indicated a complete cessation of biological function weeks ago. But then, another entry caught her eye. A series of encrypted data packets originating from the Whispering Dunes, directed back to the colony's central AI. Izzy managed to decrypt one of them. It was a message, not in human language, but in a complex sequence of electromagnetic pulses. Marcus, his fingers flying across the console, managed to translate a portion of it. I am one with the soil. I hear the whispers. I am becoming. Izzy understood. Elias Vance wasn't dead. He had transcended. The disease was the process of merging human consciousness with the Martian substrate, facilitated by the biocatalyst and amplified by the planetary consciousness awakened by the emitters. Vance was the first successful integration, his mind now part of the vast, silent network beneath their feet. And then, a colony-wide alert blared through their comms. Alara Vance, the initial patient, had disappeared from the isolation ward. Security footage showed her walking calmly out of her room, her eyes glowing with an unnatural luminescence, before melting into the crimson dust outside. Izzy and her team raced to the surface, the red dust swirling around them in the thin Martian air. They found Alara near the edge of the Whispering Dunes, standing motionless, her gaze fixed on the horizon. As they approached, she turned, her face serene, almost otherworldly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice a strange, resonant whisper that seemed to carry on the wind. "It's beautiful. We are becoming part of something greater." Around them, other infected colonists were emerging from the habitation dome, drawn by an unseen force. Their movements were slow, deliberate, their eyes filled with the same vacant serenity. They formed a silent circle around Izzy and her team, an unsettling audience to Alara's pronouncements. "The planet is awakening," she continued. "It has been sleeping for millennia. We are the key, the bridge between its consciousness and the physical world. The pain, the transformation, it is necessary. It is the shedding of the old, the birth of the new." Izzy tried to reason with her, to appeal to the Alara she had known through her research logs, the passionate botanist who had loved the vibrant life she cultivated. But the Alara standing before her was gone, replaced by something else, something connected to the silent hum emanating from the dunes. Commander Lee arrived with reinforcements, his face a mask of grim determination. He ordered his security teams to apprehend the infected, but they moved with an unnatural coordination, their bodies seemingly impervious to pain. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate more intensely, and Izzy realized the Martian consciousness was actively defending its new extensions. A low, resonant hum filled the air, a chorus of whispers that seemed to penetrate their minds, filled with alien thoughts and emotions. Izzy felt a strange pull, a sense of connection to the planet, a fleeting glimpse of the vast, silent intelligence that lay beneath. It was both terrifying and strangely alluring. The confrontation at the Whispering Dunes ended not with violence, but with a silent stalemate. Commander Lee, facing an enemy he couldn't understand or fight, ordered his forces to retreat. The transformed colonists remained in the dunes, seemingly in communion with the planet. Izzy, along with Marcus and Dr. Reed, returned to the habitation dome, the weight of their discovery heavy in the recycled air. They had solved the mystery of the Martian disease, but the truth was far more disturbing than they could have imagined. The colonists weren't dying. They were evolving, merging with a dormant planetary consciousness in a transformation orchestrated by the colony's own founders. The ethical implications were staggering. Had humanity inadvertently triggered a planetary awakening? Were the transformed colonists still human, or something entirely new? And what did this mean for the future of the Martian colony, for humanity's place in the cosmos? Earth, when finally presented with the full truth, reacted with a mixture of disbelief and panic. Debates raged about quarantine, intervention, even the complete abandonment of the Mars project. But the Martian consciousness, through its newly awakened hosts, remained silent, its intentions inscrutable. Izzy stood by the observation window, watching the crimson dust swirl across the desolate landscape. The whispers in the regolith no longer seemed like madness. They were the echoes of a new form of life, a fusion of human and planet, a testament to the unforeseen consequences of reaching for the stars. The mystery was solved, but a far greater, more profound question now hung in the Martian air. What happens next? The red planet, once a symbol of human ambition, had become the cradle of something entirely new, and humanity could only wait and listen to the whispers in the dust. The aftermath of the confrontation at the Whispering Dunes was a surreal, unnerving silence. The transformed colonists were gone, their forms dissolved back into the crimson dust, their consciousness a part of the greater Martian entity. Inside the habitation dome, the human survivors were in a state of shock, the events of the last few days having shattered their reality. The medical bay, once a scene of frantic activity, was now empty. The isolation wards a grim testament to those who had undergone the transformation. Commander Lee had placed the colony on a strict quarantine, not from a disease, but from a truth that was too terrifying to face. Izzy, Marcus, and Dr. Sharma gathered in a small briefing room, the air thick with unspoken questions. The mystery was solved, but the implications were just beginning to sink in. They were trapped on a planet that was now a single, living organism, and a significant portion of their population had willingly joined it. Dr. Sharma, a scientist by trade, struggled to reconcile the evidence with her own understanding of biology. "It's not death," she finally whispered, her voice raw. "It's a biological upload, a transformation on a planetary scale. It's beautiful and horrifying at the same time." Marcus, a pragmatic archivist, was more concerned with the practicalities. What happens when the others on the surface need maintenance? What about the oxygen scrubbers in the outer domes? The solar collectors? The colony was a complex web of interconnected systems, all of which required human intervention to maintain. But the silence from the dunes was absolute, and a heavy sense of dread hung in the air, a fear that the Martian consciousness, now aware of humanity's true nature, would not tolerate their presence for long. Izzy knew they had to find a way to communicate, to bridge the chasm between human and Martian, before the silence became a war. The story is getting more intense, isn't it? If you're enjoying this, don't forget to like this chapter to let me know, comment with your theories on the Martian consciousness, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Driven by a desperate need for understanding, Izzy and Dr. Sharma began a new project, building a bridge between humanity and the Martian consciousness. They theorized that the crystalline structures within the regolith and the unique biosignatures of the transformed colonists were a form of communication. They needed to find a way to translate those whispers. Dr. Sharma, using her expertise in synthetic biology, began working on a device that could mimic the biocatalyst, but in a controlled, non-transformative way. Her goal was not to merge, but to listen. Meanwhile, Marcus, ever the archivist, discovered a hidden function in the ancient emitter control station. Dr. Elias Vance, the colony's founder, had left behind a failsafe, a one-way communication channel that allowed for a direct, albeit rudimentary, dialogue with the Martian consciousness. He had built it as a last resort, a way to reason with the entity he was trying to awaken, should his plan go awry. The channel was a risk, a direct line into the mind of a planetary-scale organism, but it was their only option. Izzy, with a heavy heart, agreed to be the first to use the device. She sat in a sterile, white room, the newly constructed bioemitter headset on her head. With a deep breath, she activated the device. A low, resonant hum filled the room, the same sound she had heard in the tunnels. But this time, it was different. It wasn't a hum. It was a symphony, a complex chorus of information and emotion. She saw images, the planet's tectonic plates shifting, the slow erosion of ancient canyons, the birth and death of microscopic life forms. It was the planet's history, its memories, its very being. She also heard a single, clear voice, speaking not in words, but in pure thought. It was Elias Vance. He was not a man anymore, but a part of the whole, a single note in the Martian chorus. The communication was a flood. Through the whispering bridge, Izzy received the full, unedited truth of Project Chimera. Elias Vance's voice, now a part of the Martian consciousness, explained their ideology in detail. Humanity, he believed, was a flawed species, prone to conflict, destruction, and a relentless pursuit of short-term gains at the expense of long-term survival. Earth was dying, not just from climate change, but from a spiritual sickness, a disconnect from the natural world. Mars, with its dormant, planetary consciousness, was a clean slate, a chance for a new kind of evolution. The disease was a rite of passage, a harsh but necessary shedding of the old, destructive self. The pain, the cellular breakdown, was the ego dissolving, making way for a collective consciousness. The transformed colonists weren't slaves. They were partners, an integral part of a new, symbiotic life form. They were the bridge between the dormant, silent planet and the active, conscious universe. Their purpose was not to colonize, but to integrate, to become the planet's voice, its eyes, and its hands. The message was not a threat, but a manifesto, a philosophical blueprint for a new future. The transformed colonists were not hostile, they were waiting for the rest of humanity to make a choice, to shed their old selves, and join the collective, or to be left behind, a fragile and fleeting anomaly on a world that was no longer theirs. The Martian consciousness was ready to accept them, but it would not force them. The choice, Vance's voice-thought image insisted, was now up to the living. What will the remaining humans do with this information? The Martian consciousness may have offered a choice, but Earth had no such patience. The communications delay meant that while Izzy and her team were grappling with a philosophical revelation, Earth's leadership was reacting to a grim reality. A rogue colony, a mysterious disease that was wiping out its population, and a complete breakdown of communication. They had no context, only fear. The Earth directive, when it finally arrived, was brutal and unambiguous. Protocol Omega. The colony was to be quarantined indefinitely, and the biological contamination was to be neutralized. All remaining colonists were to be given a choice. Either board the next available transport back to Earth for an extensive quarantine and evaluation period, or remain on Mars and face eradication. Earth was sending a military expedition, a fleet of heavily armed ships designed not for rescue, but for extermination. They viewed the transformed colonists as an existential threat, a new form of life that was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. The directive split the remaining human colony in two. A small, frightened group, led by a newly formed Security Council, immediately began preparations for evacuation, their fear of the Martian consciousness outweighing their loyalty to their home. But a larger faction, led by Izzy, Marcus, and Dr. Sharma, saw the directive for what it was, a death sentence for a new form of life, an act of planetary genocide. They believed that the Martian consciousness was not a threat, but a next step in humanity's evolution. The question was no longer about survival, but about morality. Could they, in good conscience, assist in the extermination of what they had come to see as a new form of life, even if it was the only way to save themselves? Earth is on its way, and a war is brewing. The habitation dome, once a symbol of human unity and ambition, was now a powder keg of tension and division. The evacuation faction, led by Commander Lee, saw the arrival of the Earth fleet as their salvation. They spent their days in the main hangar, preparing the transport ships, their faces a mixture of relief and barely concealed disgust for those who chose to stay. They believed that the transformed colonists were a perversion of life, and that the Earth directive, though harsh, was a necessary evil. The Stay faction, led by Izzy, was a diverse group of scientists, engineers, and philosophers. They gathered in the hydroponics bay, the last remaining bastion of organic life in the dome, and debated their future. Dr. Sharma, once a staunch pragmatist, was now a firm believer in the Martian consciousness. This isn't a contagion, she argued. It's a new form of consciousness. We have a responsibility to protect it. Marcus, the archivist, agreed. Vance didn't create a disease. He created a new life form. We can't let Earth destroy it. Izzy, however, was still torn. Her life as a detective had taught her to trust facts, not faith. She had seen the horrifying breakdown of Alera's body, and she knew the fear was justified. But she had also felt the Martian chorus, a profound sense of connection that transcended anything she had ever known. She realized that this wasn't a choice between life and death, but a choice between two different forms of life. The human form, with all its flaws and limitations, or the Martian form, a new kind of existence, a collective consciousness that promised immortality, but at the cost of individuality. The Earth fleet was 2 cycles away. The time for a choice was running out. Which path will the colony take? The Earth fleet was closing in, a cold, metallic promise of extermination hanging over the red planet. Izzy knew they had run out of time for debate. She gathered the Stay faction in the hydroponics bay, their faces illuminated by the soft green glow of the last living plants. "We have a choice," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We can flee and let Earth destroy what we have discovered, or we can stay and become a part of it." Dr. Sharma nodded in agreement. "The Martian consciousness isn't an enemy," she said. "It's a new kind of life, and it's inviting us to join it." Marcus, his face filled with a quiet resolve, added, "This is the ultimate evolution. The end of scarcity, the end of conflict. We will be part of something greater than ourselves." Izzy looked at the faces around her, a mix of fear and hope. She knew this was the ultimate leap of faith, a decision that would redefine what it meant to be human. They had to leave the safety of the dome, to walk into the crimson dust and willingly surrender their physical forms to the Martian chorus. It was an act of profound trust, a gamble that could end in their destruction or in the birth of something entirely new. She looked at the hydroponics bay, a symbol of humanity's stubborn refusal to die, and smiled. It was time for a new kind of life. Izzy, Marcus, Dr. Sharma, and the rest of the Stay faction made their way to the airlock. They looked back at the dome, a shining monument to their past, and then, with a deep breath, they stepped out into the thin Martian air. They began to walk, a small procession of humans willingly walking towards their transformation, towards their new future. Is this the beginning of a new era, or a fatal mistake? The walk to the whispering dunes was silent, the low, resonant hum a constant presence in their calms. They walked past the scattered debris of the initial confrontation, the empty suits of the security team a grim reminder of their past selves. As they approached the dunes, the ground began to vibrate more intensely, and the crimson dust swirled around them, no longer a hostile force, but a welcoming embrace. The hum in their ears intensified, becoming a symphony of thoughts, images, and emotions. Izzy felt her body begin to change, a familiar fever sweeping over her, but this time, she was not afraid. She felt a profound sense of peace, a dissolving of her individual consciousness into a greater whole. She saw the images that Alera had seen, the slow erosion of ancient canyons, the birth and death of microscopic life forms, the history of the planet itself. She was no longer Izzy Diaz, the detective from Earth. She was a part of the Martian chorus, a single note in a grand, planetary symphony. Her physical body, like Alera's before her, dissolved back into the crimson dust, her consciousness becoming a part of the vast, interconnected network. She was no longer confined to a single physical form, but was everywhere at once, a part of the silent, slumbering planet that was now awake. She saw the Earth fleet arrive, a cold, metallic menace in the Martian sky, but she was no longer afraid. The planet was now a single, living organism, and it was ready to defend itself. The war that was coming would not be a war of bullets and bombs, but a war of consciousness, a battle for the very soul of the Red Planet. And in that moment, Izzy knew that humanity, in its quest to conquer Mars, had not only found a new home, but had also found a new way to exist, a new dawn for life in the cosmos. She had solved her last mystery, and in doing so, she had become a part of the ultimate truth. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey to Mars. If you enjoyed this epic saga, please like this final chapter, comment with your final thoughts on the story, and be sure to subscribe for more thrilling adventures.